As we say in recovery, there is no healing without feeling. You have got to experience and release the hurt and fear inside of you, or your life will never change. You'll continue repeating the same patterns. I know it can be really terrifying to think about doing that because we think we're going to get into those feelings and we will feel them forever and never get out of them. And that is not what happens. What most of us have been doing, what I was definitely doing, was actually resisting those feelings my whole life, which is actually much, much worse than just allowing the feelings to come up, feel them, and move on. Hi, I'm Barb Nangle. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery, where I help people heal their emotional, psychological, and spiritual wounds and make deep, lasting changes in their lives. I'm the founder and CEO of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. I'm a boundaries coach who specializes in helping women who are focused on what others are thinking and doing and neglect themselves in the process. And I have coached hundreds of people on how to build healthy boundaries using my exclusive Build framework. On this podcast, I share my experience, strength, and hope from recovery. I don't support or endorse any particular 12-step recovery fellowship, and I don't claim to speak for any particular 12-step fellowship. I also don't believe that 12-step recovery is the only way to recover. You might need additional help. I'm an avid beachcomber who collects sea glass, shells, wood, and stones. I am a formerly closeted fan of the Hallmark Channel, especially the Christmas movies. Hello, Christmas in July. I wear fingerless gloves from September to June because my hands are always cold, so I have about 15 pairs. And I get a huge kick out of counting how many days, weeks, and months there are until my birthday or Christmas at completely random times of the year. My hope is that you'll find my words concretely helpful in improving your life, whether you're in recovery or not. If you like what you've heard on this episode, please screenshot it and share it on your social media and tag me at Higher Power Coaching. This is episode 273, the ACA Solution and How to Overcome Intergenerational Family Dysfunction. Yesterday, I was on a call with a newcomer in ACA, and we went through one of the foundational documents of the ACA program, paragraph by paragraph. And I shared my perception and experience of what each of those things mean. And then she shared what came up for her. And it was an incredibly fruitful discussion. And she found it extremely helpful in grounding her in what the ACA process of recovery looks like and what it leads to. So I decided that today I'm going to do that same thing here on the podcast. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, ACA is the 12-Step Recovery Program, also known as ACOA, and the full name is Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. It's a trauma recovery program where we reparent ourselves and use the 12 steps to recover. The foundational document I'm referring to is called The Solution, and I've put a link in the show notes to the document on the ACA World Service Office website. What I encourage you to do is have that document handy while you're listening to this, even if you're familiar with it. Perhaps read through it before you listen. Then once you've listened to the whole episode, maybe listen to it again while reading along and pause it after each paragraph or so you can make notes of what came up for you or maybe journal on it. That way, your experience will be similar to the newcomer I spoke with, where she got to hear about it, then internalize it and relate it to her own experience. Now, of course, this is optional. You can do whatever the fuck you want. Okay, so here goes. Line 1 is the solution is to become your own loving parent. What that fundamentally means is that you will learn to love yourself in the ways that you wanted and needed and deserved to be loved as a child. In other words, you will stop seeking what you missed as a child from everybody and everything around you, and you will learn to give it to yourself. Now, learning to become your own loving parent can be as simple and basic as you are good and kind to yourself. Most adult children beat the shit out of themselves in their heads, usually constantly. Becoming your own loving parent can also be as complex and intense as cultivating an entire cast of characters internally in your mind, such as inner child, inner teenager, inner loving parent, and inner critical parent. Then reparenting yourself using those characters to reenact scenes from the past and or to check in with what's going on with them right now and then direct them to do what's needed. In my first several years of ACA, I dabbled in that work. I was aware that I had an inner child, but that was about as far as it went. If you've been listening for a while, you know that that changed dramatically last year, and now I have an entire cast of characters, including my inner child, who is about 5, and I call her Spark, my inner 11-year-old, who I call Barb, and my inner teen, who I call Sissy. I also have an inner critical parent. Her name is Irene. And my inner loving parents are Big Mama. I have a new loving version of my dad now that he's deceased, who I call Papa, and then Jesus, but specifically the version of Jesus from the show The Chosen. I check in with my inner children on a regular basis, just about daily, and the rest come into play as needed. I cannot express to you the level of healing that this practice has brought me. The next line says, ACA becomes a safe place for you, and you'll find freedom to express all the hurts and fears you have kept inside and to free yourself from the shame and blame that are carryovers from the past. As we say in recovery, there is no healing without feeling. You have got to experience and release the hurt and fear inside of you, or your life will never change. You'll continue repeating the same patterns. I know it can be really terrifying to think about doing that because we think we're going to get into those feelings and we will feel them forever and never get out of them. And that is not what happens. What most of us have been doing, what I was definitely doing, was actually resisting those feelings my whole life, which is actually much, much worse than just allowing the feelings to come up, feel them, and move on. And yes, it is difficult to feel them and face them, but it doesn't even last a minute once you actually allow yourself to feel them. Feelings are energy that moves through you. They are sensations in your body that eventually dissipate. Then it talks about shame and blame. Shame is the legacy of adult children. I know I felt shame for mundane shit like wanting to wear makeup when I was a young girl. And I felt it so deeply that even when my mom asked me if I wanted to wear makeup, which I longed for, I said no because I felt ashamed. I don't even know where that came from or what that was about. And I didn't even realize that that was shame until I got into recovery. That feeling was pervasive throughout my life. It came at every stage of life and from every corner. We get to let go of that. Then it talks about letting go of blame. When we blame, we are coming from victim mentality. We're acting as if we can't do anything about the situation we're in. And that was probably true when we were children, but it's no longer true now that we're adults. It also says you will become an adult who is imprisoned no longer by childhood reactions. In other words, instead of just reacting to situations from the wombs of the past and in the ways we always have, we will start taking charge of our lives, making conscious decisions about how we want to live, and responding much more frequently from a rational mind. And then the last line of that paragraph says, you will recover the child within you by learning to love and accept yourself. So instead of burying that innocence, instead of avoiding the feelings that come from that inner child, you will tap into the joy and innocence that is there as you learn to love and accept yourself. And even if you believe that that is an impossible task to love and accept yourself, I encourage you to keep coming back because I have seen before my very eyes numerous people go from decades of utter self-loathing to loving themselves as they continue their recovery and work in the ACA program. Okay, on to the second paragraph, first sentence. The healing begins when we risk moving out of isolation. This is one thing that everybody in recovery is super fucking good at, isolation. And what I told the newcomer yesterday is there's really no way to do ACA recovery wrong, except if you try to do it alone. Humans are wired for connection. We heal in community and we're obsessive and compulsive in isolation. We're protected when we're connected. So coming out of isolation is imperative for this recovery. We need to be with other people, to be seen by other people, to hear our stories alive in other people and see that we are not alone in the ways that we always thought we were, to see that we're not crazy. We are not completely and irreparably broken and beyond hope of repair. Then it says, feelings and buried memories will return. This is part of the process of coming out of denial in ACA. I have a number of episodes about coming out of denial because it's such an important part of ACA recovery. Those are linked in the show notes. And the reason I have so many is because denial is a huge part of my journey, and I share as each layer comes to my consciousness. And my journey out of denial has been an unfolding process that happens bit by bit over the years. Most of the time, denial means that I say something isn't true, but that's not really the kind of denial we're talking about here. We're talking about is that we start to feel things that we weren't allowed to feel or didn't feel safe feeling as children. We start to remember things that we forgot. And don't worry, your psyche will protect you if you're not able to emotionally handle memories that come up. They will come up when you are ready to handle them psychically, emotionally, spiritually, etc. It also means you'll start to see patterns that you never saw before. You'll start to recognize things that you used to think were normal as actually dysfunctional or maybe even abusive and traumatic. You'll start to put things together in ways that you never saw as being connected. It also says, by gradually releasing the burden of unexpressed grief, we slowly move out of the past. In the ACA program, step 5 is the grief buster. It's also the shame buster. Step 5 is where we share our shortcomings with our higher power, ourself, and another person. In ACA, we don't just share our shortcomings, we primarily share what happened to us as children. And when we do all that at once, it is impossible to deny that dysfunction that happened to us. So, of course, there's all kinds of grieving associated with specific incidents, but the major grief comes from looking at the big picture, looking at all the shit that happened to us together at one time and the grief about what we actually experienced in our dysfunctional families as children and what could have happened if instead we were brought up in a happy, healthy, loving, supportive, nurturing, functional home. It's really important to express that grief because it's almost like a giant blockage in the pipeline of our lives, especially the emotional pipeline of our lives. Then it says, we release that grief, we slowly move out of the past. That's because we're not carrying that grief around with us everywhere. It's no longer like an anchor or a huge boulder that we're dragging around. So we get to move into the present. I was a crier my entire life, and I'm not anymore. And I think what was going on is that I would be triggered by something going on in the present, and I would cry in volumes, which, by the way, I did in isolation at home, alone, by myself. It was a while into my recovery before I ever felt comfortable crying in front of other humans. I think what was going on is that I was triggered by whatever was happening in the moment, but the tears were so huge and out of proportion because I had this gigantic well of grief that I didn't even know existed. And I was crying from that place. Now, because I've released the burden of that unexpressed grief, I don't cry like that anymore. I do cry from time to time. The most frequent reason for me crying is because I'm moved by something that is so loving, like an expression of God. But when I do cry about something that's sad, it's typically when I'm reparenting and feeling something from the past, but it's finite. It doesn't feel like it's going to last forever the way that it used to. Then it says we learn to reparent ourselves with gentleness, humor, love, and respect. These are really good guidelines. If you think, how can I possibly reparent myself when I wasn't parented properly? I don't know how to do that. Use these words as your guides: gentleness, humor, love, and respect. Those are guides for how to behave toward yourself. When you are doing and saying things to yourself, use gentleness, humor, love, and respect. Think about how you treat people you love. Think about how you would treat an innocent child. Think about how you treat your pets. Those are good guidelines for how to reparent yourself. You are not going to beat yourself up into a better version of yourself. You're going to use gentleness, humor, love, and respect. It then says this process allows us to see our biological parents as the instruments of our existence. Our actual parent is a higher power whom some of us choose to call God. Although we had alcoholic or dysfunctional parents, our higher power gave us the 12 steps of recovery. What this tells us is that we no longer have to look to our parents to try to extract parenting from them. That's not their job any longer. Their job was to birth us. They did. And now we're going to turn to some kind of a higher power, which some of us choose to call God. Not everybody does. And that higher power gave us the 12 steps from which we are able to heal. The 12 steps of recovery is the magic formula for adult children to recover. In this program, we recover by reparenting ourselves and using the 12 steps to recover. If you've done the 12 steps in another program and never done them in ACA, it is a qualitatively different experience in this program. For one thing, in this program, we see ourselves as products of our environment. When I did the 12 steps in my other program, I wasn't allowed to look at my environment. I wasn't allowed to look at my family history or what was happening there. I was only allowed to look at me, and that was important, and it really helped me a lot. But it doesn't get the full story. The next paragraph tells you what actions to take, and we know that because it starts by saying, this is the action and work that heals us. Then it lists the actions we need to take and the work we need to do to heal. It's basically the formula for how to recover. It says we use the steps, we use the meetings, we use the telephone. So we use the steps. You are not going to recover if you don't do the steps, period. We use the meetings. In other words, we need to come out of isolation, be in connection with other humans, hear their stories, and share our stories with them. And we use the telephone. We stay connected to people, including outside of the meetings. My recommendation when you first get into recovery is start making phone calls or sending texts to people just to stay connected. Maybe just say, hey, thinking of you. Just for the purpose of staying connected so that when the shit hits the fan and you really need to reach out for support, it will be infinitely easier to do that because you've already been doing it. I also highly recommend going out for coffee afterwards if you're in person or staying on Zoom and having a coffee chat afterwards so you can connect about things outside of recovery. When I got into my other program, I was told to make 3 phone calls a day, not 3 text messages. And it wasn't about leaving voicemails. It was 3 phone calls a day. Now, I did not follow those instructions precisely, but That instruction caused me to reach out more than I ever did before. I made way more connections than I would have. My sponsor said, I don't care what you say to them. I don't care if you say, hey, my sponsor told me to make 3 outreach calls. They might respond with, oh my God, my sponsor said the same thing. And a conversation will occur from there. So reaching out is super important. And of course, I have episodes about that too. I will link the very first one I did about that in the show notes. Then it says we share our experience, strength, and hope with each other. That phrase, experience, strength, and hope, is common in other recovery programs. And what that means is we share what life was like, what happened to us, and what life is like now that we've got some recovery under our belts. Our experience, our strength, and our hope. That is the formula for when you share your story. It's the formula for when you share with a newcomer, because you want people to identify with you by saying, my life was like this, so newcomers can recognize that you were like them. Then you share how you got into recovery, a little bit about what you did and learned in recovery. That's your strength. And then here's what my life is like now. Here are the effects of recovery so far. That is the hope. We have to do that with each other so that we know we're in the right place. We share with other people and they share with us, and we can benefit and bond with other people. It then says we learn to restructure our sick thinking one day at a time. In ACA Step 1, we say we are powerless over the effects of growing up in a dysfunctional family. And the main effects are fear and distorted thinking. That means we think things that are distorted, like, I'm the worst piece of shit on the planet. I should never have been born. I'm a loser. If everyone would just listen to me, then everything would be okay. I'm never going to heal. Things are never going to get better. Bad things always happen to me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is sick thinking, and we learn to restructure it one day at a time, not 20 years at a time, one day at a time. Then it says, when we release our parents from responsibility for our actions today, we become free to make healthful decisions as actors, not reactors. So instead of dragging around the blame of our parents, which is what I did, we get to take responsibility for the things we've done as an adult. When I made amends in step 9, I took responsibility for the shitty things I did. Now, granted, I did them because of the patterns I internalized because of the family dysfunction, but I am the only one who can take responsibility for those actions. My parents can't do my recovery for me. When I start to take responsibility for my actions, I become an actor in my life rather than a reactor. For me, this was hands down the greatest change and transformation in my recovery. I came out of victim mentality. I now get to decide how I'm going to live, and then I live that way. We get to act on life rather than reacting to it. When we're reacting to life, we are acting out of the patterns of the past, when we were living in shame and blame. Then it says we progress from hurting to healing to helping, and this order is very important. Of course, we are all hurting when we get into recovery, but we can't go right from hurting to helping because that would be codependent. That's probably what most of us have been doing our whole lives. We go from hurting to healing to helping. When you heal, you then have a message of healing to help other people with. That is partly how I learned to give service from a place of love rather than to give service out of obligation, which is what I did when I was a volunteeraholic before recovery. It says we awaken to a sense of wholeness we never knew was possible. This right here is why my podcast is called Fragmented to Whole. Because when I look back at my life before recovery, I felt like I was a bunch of fragmented pieces. I was fragmented in body, mind, and spirit because of the shame and blame. I was fragmented because I had all these different facades up because I was so afraid of being abandoned, judged, or rejected. And I was fragmented because I fucking lied about everything, even though I thought I was an honest person. And then I became whole because my recovery helped me integrate those fragmented pieces into one coherent whole and get rid of the pieces that were not authentically me. So integration is related to the word integrity. I didn't realize that until a couple of years ago. And integrity is another word for wholeness. Listen, if you want to have a high quality life, I absolutely recommend wholeness. You are not going to believe how it's going to feel. And the way I think of it is, I can be rocked by things that happen to me, but I can no longer be shattered by them because I'm no longer fragmented. I am whole. It then says, by attending these meetings on a regular basis, you will come to see parental alcoholism or family dysfunction for what it is. A disease that infected you as a child and continues to affect you as an adult. In other words, this shit is insidious. It's intergenerational. Your parents have it, they got it from their parents, and they pass it on. And you will continue to pass it on until you recover from these patterns. What this helped me do was let go of the blame, especially of my dad. I think I always intellectually understood that he did the best he could, but now I really get it. When I looked at the intergenerational nature of the family dysfunction, I could see he was literally hobbled by all of the dysfunction he experienced and all of his patterns. So there was no way he could have been a high quality parent. This intergenerational dysfunction is really insidious and it takes some really deep work to manage it. It goes on to say, you will learn to keep the focus on yourself in the here and now. I cannot tell you how imperative this is. I don't think it's possible to grow up in a dysfunctional family and not have some level of codependence. And essentially, codependent people look outside themselves. They are not focused internally. They pay attention to, what does he need? What does she need? What does the situation require? What does the organization require? Or maybe, what is he doing, saying, or thinking? Or what is she doing, saying, or thinking about me? The problem with that external focus is that we're focused on people, places, and things. And that is an endless drain on our energy because we cannot control those things. And that is what we've been trying to do our entire lives. So we're fucking exhausted and we feel ineffectual in our lives. That is why we need to keep the focus on ourselves, which is all we can control. This is something I harp on repeatedly with my boundaries coaching clients. I have multiple podcasts on keeping the focus on yourself, but I'm only going to link one in the show notes, and it's from one of my earliest episodes. It's one of my top tools of recovery, learning to keep the focus on myself. And then it says in the here and now. So not just keep the focus on yourself and ruminate about the past or catastrophize about the future, but focus on the here and now, because this moment, here and now, the present moment, is the only moment in which you can heal. And it is the only moment in which you can take action. One really easy way to focus on the present moment is to get into your body, either by paying attention to your feet on the ground, your butt in the seat, your breath, or connecting with your senses, because you can only experience those right now. All right. The next line is, you will take responsibility for your own life and supply your own parenting. We've already talked about what that means. You let go of expecting your parents to all of a sudden step up and take responsibility and apologize and repair the past. They can't do that because it's your life. And if you want your life to change, you have to take that responsibility. No one can do it for you. I know, sad, isn't it? Actually, no, it's empowering. It's empowering because you no longer have to wait for others to change. Then it says, you will not do this alone. Look around you and you will see others who know how you feel. You cannot do this alone, as I said earlier. When I hear this line in meetings, I literally look around the room or the Zoom room at other people so that I can remember I am not alone in this. These people are just like me. Then it says, we will love and encourage you no matter what. We ask you to accept us just as we accept you. We get to stop judging other people and we get to stop judging ourselves. We get to accept ourselves and accept and be accepted by other people because we finally found our people. Then it says, this is a spiritual program based on action coming from love. So this is not some mundane workshop that you're going to that's been put on by someone in the business world. This is a spiritual program. And you have to take action. You cannot just read about it, think about it, and talk about it. You have to take action, and that action comes from love, not spite or hatred or self-loathing. And then at the end it says, we are sure that as the love grows inside you, you will see beautiful changes in all your relationships, especially with yourself, God, and your parents. Love is healing. It is the magic formula. We become our own loving parent. And if you don't know how to do it just yet, just keep coming back because you're going to learn how to do that. And when you do, there will be a ripple effect from your relationship with yourself to your higher power, and you will come to see your parents differently. You may not come to love and or like them, but you will absolutely come to see them differently as a result of this ACA recovery program. You will not be able to believe how different you will be when you have completed the 12 steps and the reparenting work in this program. It costs the average professional woman $20,500 per year to keep saying yes when she really wants to say no and neglecting herself because she's so focused on others. Here's how I know. I went to AI for help and it told me to include time spent on unwanted tasks, opportunity costs, and the cost to their health and well-being in figuring this out. So here are the numbers it gave me. Time spent on unwanted tasks was assumed to be 5 hours per week, and the average professional women's salary is $103,000 per year. So that's a total of $12,500 per year. Opportunity costs are what these women potentially miss in career advancement, skill development, bonuses, etc. That's assumed at $5,000. Health and well-being includes increased medical expenses of $1,000 due to stress and self-neglect, and $2,000 due to decreased productivity because of burnout. So if you want an extra $20,500 per year, you've got to stop saying yes and neglecting yourself. So if that's you or the women in your organization, please contact me, barb@higherpowercc.com, for either private coaching, trainings, or keynote speeches. If you like this podcast, and I'm guessing you did or you wouldn't still be listening, then you're gonna love the other things I have to offer. If you'd love pre-release podcast scripts and episodes before anyone else gets them, or if you'd love access to content from my private vault that I developed exclusively for my private clients, which is like having a work session with me without me actually being there, go to patreon.com/higherpowercoaching. There are 3 tiers ranging from as low as $4 up to $24 a month. You'll also love my weekly newsletter, Friday Fragments, which has content very similar to the podcast. You can check it out at fridayfragments.news. That's fridayfragments.news. Please like and subscribe to my podcast on your favorite podcast outlet. I'd also love it if you'd leave a review, which you can do either in the show notes or on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other people find my podcast so they can get the benefits you've gotten from listening. If someone came to mind when you listened to this particular episode, please share it with them. And my favorite place to hang out on social media is Instagram. I'm at Higher Power Coaching. Please DM me there. I'd love to hear what you got from this episode. I run group and private coaching programs on building healthy boundaries. Whether you need help with boundaries in your personal, professional, or romantic life, I can help. Head on over to barbchat.net, where you can hop onto my calendar for a free 30-minute Better Boundaries consultation. My ideal client is someone who is ripe for change. If that's you, I would love to work with you. My goal with all my work is to help you make lasting changes in your life, like I've made deep, lasting changes in my life. Remember, it's never too late to recover. No one is beyond hope, and healing is possible. Thanks for listening.